The word exile, which translates into English as exile. I would like you to elaborate on the choice of this word, exile.
A publisher asked me to write my autobiography, and I said, it's not very interesting, no, it doesn't interest me. And then I thought of the word exile. And from the moment that I thought of the word exile, I wrote a list of 28 exiles in my life. An exile for me is going from one state to another state. It's not necessarily negative, an exile. You could go from one state to an even better state. My first exile in the book is being born. That's a tremendous exile. You're warm, you're happy, you have food, you feel good, and then you know, that's a terrible exile. So that's how it started. I thought being born. And then I don't remember all my exiles, but going to school. You know, leaving your family, going to school, having to be disciplined, and that was another exile. And so I talked about my going to school. I was going to school was the only way. I had very beautiful sisters, very beautiful, exotic, eccentric sisters, and the only way for me to be a bright light was to be a good student. So that was my only way of surviving in my family, was to be a good student. In fact, I was the youngest, but I did my sisters' homework. I read the books they had to read, and I wrote their book reports. If I wrote their book reports, they took me for ice cream. That was my way of being school. I don't remember all the exiles. Falling in love, that's a tremendous exile. You're alone, you think of yourself, and then you're two, and two have to become one. And it's a problem, and there are a lot of compromises, and living with somebody is not easy. So a lot of compromises, especially in a French-American atmosphere. We would scream across the house. My husband would say something in French, and I'd say, "Quoi?" And I would say something in English, and he'd say, "Quoi?" And that's how we communicated. So love is quite an exile too. You exile from the state of being one to being two, and then becoming one again. And being sick was an exile. I was very sick, and I went into another life, the life of a sick person. And that's also very interesting, and not necessarily negative, because you become much more compassionate and understanding when you're sick. Compassionate and understanding of people who are sick. And then my final exile is death. And I describe my death and my funeral. It will not be in here in Varanasi, where people come to die. I hope I don't die here. I almost did on the train. I had my first train ride yesterday. It was an adventure. And so, yes, exile became a word that allowed me to write the book. And the book has been surprisingly successful. We don't write to be successful. We don't write to make money, because we don't. We write because we have to write. That's all. But when a book is successful, it's nice. And this was it wasn't my first book for adults. But it was the first time that I was on every television program, every radio program, every magazine, every newspaper. I became the media queen in France. I had 6 interviews a day. Never writing a children's book do you get any attention. And I had to write a book for old people in order to get some attention. I was very indignant about it. At the time that I wrote this book, a French writer named Jean-Claude Morlevat won the biggest children's book prize, the Astrid Lindgren Memorial Prize. Nobody talked about it. Nobody. They just talked about me. And I talked about it. Every time I was interviewed, I'd say Jean-Claude Morlevat just won this big prize and he's a wonderful writer. But nobody's interested in children's books. I don't know about India.
Well, it's an upcoming market, but yeah, it's emerging.
It's coming, it's emerging, yes. It is emerging in France also.
Thank you so much for that question, for that answer. Sorry.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. Last question, and then the session would be open for a quick Q&A round with the public. So what I would like to ask you is, since many students here, or I think most of the students who are here are from the Department of Languages and Foreign Languages, French, German, English. So, and I'm very sure most of them have this in their head that they will also be writing and publishing someday in a language which is not their native language. So what advice would you like to give to them, being a non-native French speaker and writing in French? That's my last question.
What advice for language learning?
Yes.
Don't be lazy. I regret very much my American education. We go to school with baseball bats, with tennis rackets, with tennis shoes. We're very happy to go to school. We're totally happy learning nothing. No languages, no philosophy, no geography. I didn't know where France was as a child. I regret so much that I didn't learn languages. Because when you don't learn languages, your ears close. Americans don't learn languages. We speak English, that's enough. Everybody has to speak English. I would like now to learn Hindi. Ha! It's late for me because there is an age limit for learning languages. You have to learn now, young. Learn as many languages as you can. And it's hard to learn a language. It's a lot of work to learn a language. I never did the work. I didn't even do the work in French. See, I should have gone to a speech therapist to learn how to say things like Look what you have to do to say It's muscular. I should have done exercises to learn the language, but I'm lazy. All I want to do is write. But I don't do sports either, and I think you should do sports too. I think it's the best, most important thing to learn. Languages. What is more important than to be able to communicate with people all over? Nothing's more important. Learn languages. Don't be lazy. If you're learning French, try to learn Italian, try to learn Hungarian, try to learn every language that's available to you. Boy, if I could start my life again, I would speak 10 languages now.
It was such a pleasure listening to you this. It's okay, you're loud now. It was such a pleasure listening to you talk. First of all, I want to say that I love your glasses. It's the first thing I noticed when I saw your picture. And you seem the type of person who likes to look at life through rose-colored glasses, and you are wearing rose-colored glasses. My question to you is that you spoke about having experienced grief in your life, the loss of your husband. I imagine must have been particularly challenging, as well as having experienced some type of illness as well. What I wanted to ask was that did grief affect your writing?
Very good question. Yes, grief affected my writing, especially writing for children, because I think that when you write for children, you have to hold their hand while you're writing for them. I think you have to be optimistic. We have to tell children that life is good, life is wonderful, life is worth living, life is great, and wait. For 2 years after my husband died, I didn't write for children. I wrote about him, and that was my book of mourning. And 20 years after that book, that I wrote it for me, for my family, I didn't write it to publish. But 20 years after, somebody asked me, a publisher asked me if I would write a book about how I became what I became. And I said, I don't know. And then I thought, how did I become what I became? A French writer? That was Jacques. And so I wrote a book called Jacques a dit. And I sent her the manuscript I had written 20 years before. And she was in Paris, I'm in Nice. The next day, she took a plane to Nice, and she came to see me and said, I want to publish that book. And it's called Jacques a dit, and it's about my marriage. But yes, grief affects the way you write. Of course it affects. Everything we are affects how we write. So for 2 years I didn't write for children. But I have to tell you that when my husband died, I said to myself, and I tell this to all my widowed friends, because all my friends at my age are becoming widows, I said, when Jacques died, I said, Jacques is dead, but I'm alive, and I will make the most of this.
That's a beautiful answer. So, yes, sir. I don't think the mic is working.
Thank you very much. Let me express that you are one of the most elegant women and very wonderful conversationist. And aura is beautiful, everybody is liking you, and the way you dealt with the questions, the way she asked the questions, is one of the wonderful models we will have. My question is that life might not be beautiful, but the world is beautiful. And in this world, do you think that what ought to be, it becomes your priority to write, or what it is, that becomes your priority to write? Because what I feel, this world is filled with domination, power, discipline, if I say like Michel Foucault, stupidity. So we want a new world order where compassion, women, nature, it becomes priorities. And I think that the world will be beautiful by then. And this world is an ugly world. So do you think what ought to be, what it is, dreams you are writing, scenario? Well, I am myself writing. I have written 2 novels.
Okay.
Yeah.
In English?
In English.
Wow.
Yes. Because I too have been affected by the displacement of Kashmir. And I was passionately in love with Kashmir. So why this estrangement? My best friend was a Muslim friend. Yet we were displaced. So these dilemmas, these questions of world order, boundaries, nationalities, religions, we want a world beyond that. We want frontiers, we don't want borders. We want frontiers where knowledge will take place, that exchange will be of love and compassion. So that world I think that should novelists and writers, should you do what ought to be or what it is? And where do you place yourself?
I often think that there should be more intelligent people in the world to solve the problems. And why can't we solve the problems when there are so many intelligent people, like they get together in Davos in Switzerland, and no, there are no solutions. All our leaders are so bad. I don't think we've ever had a period with such bad leaders in every country. And there I go. And all I can do in my role as a writer is try to express hope, you know? And that's why writing for children is so special. You know, they are the hope in the world. I just wrote a book with my granddaughter. It's called Les Vertueuses, V-E-R-T, the green people, about environment, about a group of children who try to improve the environment. I try in a very modest way to improve, like this teacher, this great teacher. These children go to school the first day and they're hoping for an athletic, young, beautiful teacher, and they get an old, fat man with glasses. And so they're all terribly disappointed, and he ends up being the greatest teacher of them all. This is my way of contributing in all the schools in France. This book has been translated into 30 languages, and in all the schools in France, it's a book of coupons. All the schools make coupons, how to improve their school and their life. And so it's my very modest way of trying, but I don't think that we writers have a tremendous impact on the world. I am realistic in that. And I wrote this book, Je suis un génie. I'm a genius. You can see who's on the cover. This is very modest. Perhaps tonight I will read it. I think helping the world is making people laugh. Humor is a great help to the world, seeing things with humor. And this is something that you have or you don't have. You know, not all writers have humor. This is my way of maybe making little tiny changes. You go. I love questions because it tells me who you are.
And I love asking questions.
It's the most important thing, is to ask questions.
I really enjoyed the session, and the thing is that I want to ask you 2 questions.
You can ask 10 questions if you want.
I'll just ask you. The first one being, what is your take on the censorship on children's book?
Oh, wonderful. Can I answer that first?
Yes, please.
You know, there's the big problem of Roald Dahl right now. Roald Dahl. So they changed fat. You can't be fat in a book. I wrote a book called Confessions of a Fatso. How would we change that title? Fat is fat. It's not a dirty word. It's just fat. So they made it enormous. Is it better to be enormous than just to be plain fat? It's a terrible thing. Roald Dahl is not politically correct. He was not a nice man. He was a virulent anti-Semite, misogynist, but he wrote great books.
He did.
Huh?
He did.
Yeah.
Except the witches.
But we can't change what he was in life and what he was in the book. I'm very much against it, and I was very proud that my publisher in France did not make the changes.
My second question is, like, you interestingly mentioned that you are writing on diseases and disabilities, right? Have you written children's books on disability?
Yeah, just one. A book about a diabetic girl and what it means to be diabetic and how she handles it.
Now, the thing is that can those books be accessible to us here in India or other developing countries? Because the accessibility for us is an issue. And we have kids who are disabled and who want to read. My nephew is actually disabled. And it's not easily accessible for us to make them read those books. Because they don't feel represented in the children's literature which we get. So, can you say something?
This book, my book is called Privé de bon bec, Deprived of Candy. It has not been published, I think, at all, any place. It's just, it's a book that exists only in French. But, you see, American publishers are smart in the way that they say, oh, they ask librarians what books are lacking, and they ask authors to write books about what is lacking. So there are lists of books about handicaps in English. You can just look on Google and say books about handicap for children. You'll get hundreds of titles.
Again, the accessibility is definitely an issue for us because we don't get our hands on those books. They're definitely they're meant for the US or the UK or the Western markets, not for the Indian subcontinent, making South Asian people especially. So that's where the problem lies.
So I don't know what to do for you.
Maybe I just wrote in my to-do list that I should get a copy of this book brought to the issue. The only thing is you'll have to learn French to I don't think I do my best to bring this.
Or perhaps some of you studying translation could translate the book. Perhaps Vincent will make the book available to you, and if you'd like to translate it and try to get it published in India. We were supposed to be meeting publishers at the World Book Fair. I didn't meet any publishers at the World Book Fair, but you know, if you love a book from another country, you can really try to translate it and try to get in touch with the publisher and ask him to publish it. That's often the way it's done. I brought to my publisher, when I came to France, I brought the books of Judy Blume. And it's thanks to me that they're published in French. Because I love them, my children love them, and so they were translated into French because of me. So you can have an action in this. You can participate in getting things published.
Yeah, sure. So have you written something on witches?
Oh, what a funny question. What a funny question. It's one of my favorite subjects. I love witches. There's a town near Nice in Italy called Triora, and witches were burnt there in the 17th century. And I go to that town all the time, and there are witches' houses and statues of witches, and I love to go there. I have always wanted to write a book about a witch, and I have never succeeded. I've started dozens of books about witches, and I have never succeeded. I think it's just too important to me. I'm too afraid of failing. I just wrote a book about a monster. It's called Monstre cherche mon stress. A monster is looking for a monsteress. And I wrote it because I met a young illustrator and I loved his work, and I said, what kind of book do you want to illustrate? And he said a book about monsters. So he illustrated the book.
Good morning, ma'am.
Rohan, just then you
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful talk. I have a question that you have mentioned that I went to France with 3 birds. And the one that happens to me when reading about you is the 3 birds and how did the world transform for you to write so much in French after those 3 words.
The 3 words didn't do much for me. The 3 words were bonjour,
It's a very good stuff.
merci, and I thought goodbye was allez-vous-en, which means go away. And I used to tell people, I got in a lot of trouble. There's also tu and vous, which doesn't exist in English. So I just said tu to everybody. To my boss at the university, tu vas bien? There's not only language, but there's social meaning of things.
Yes, Rohan. Sandeep, sorry.
Good morning. That was very, your session, your presentation was extremely nice. Fantastic. Now I have a question. You mentioned the conflict of interest between you and your daughter. So, like, how it triggered you to write, and was it like your daughter she was also writing to you, and you were writing to her, and is there any influence of Madame de Sévigné, a writer of 17th century? So was there any connection between, you and her directly in terms of writing, because she was also writing for her daughter.
But she was writing nice things. Writing was my way of living. I wrote to my mother to come to France to marry Jacques. I had to leave my mother and my sisters and brownies and muffins, and they didn't exist in France at that time. And it was what triggered. It was not Madame de Sévigné, because at that time I didn't know Madame de Sévigné. After I went to Grignon to her chateau, and then I bought her book. Yeah, much later. What triggered it with my daughter was she was quite a literary girl, and we couldn't talk at all. So I had to try something. And she was in high school still, and when the book came out, she was in prépa, how we say that, in the preparation for what we call in France les grandes écoles, the most prestigious schools. And I just wrote it and I gave it to her. It's just my way of living, is writing. I used to write to my husband too, I'd say.
She replied that?
She replied immediately. She closed her door, she replied immediately.
How is she now reacting? After years, how is she now reacting? Is she friendly to you? Or she remembers those things?
Is she now?
No.
She's quite friendly to me now, yeah.
She regrets that she has said bad words about you?
Oh no. No. She did the preparation for the grandes écoles, the prestigious schools. She entered École Normale Supérieure, which is very prestigious.